My name is Jonathan Bartley. I'm co-leader of the Green Party, and once a month I'll be hosting a series which will gather Greens from around the country to share their stories on how collaboration, how inclusion, how participation in our democracy hold the key to delivering the urgent system change that we need to deliver environmental, social and economic justice for everyone. Tonight's conversation, we're going to be discussing the journey of activism. And over the last few years, young activists have taken on the climate crisis. We've seen so many young activists taking on the climate crisis, not least because it will determine the course of their lives, showing real climate leadership. And often the stories of those who paved the way and inspired young people to fight in the first place span the ages in addition to those young people. So we're going to be looking right across the ages tonight. And also the stories are more complicated than we sometimes understand them to be. Throughout history, movements have exploded and then they've sometimes just fizzled out, often because there's no political grounding to back them up. So ahead of the youth climate strikes on the 19th of March, our guests are going to share their stories and people who inspired their work. They're going to tell us about them, as well as their own hopes for the future. But before I introduce the guests, and I will do that in just one second, just a quick bit of housekeeping. We'll have just under 20 minutes for questions in the second half of this event. We're going to wrap the event up at 7 o'clock, so we've got an hour. So please put your questions now in the Q&A for upvoting. So we'll be able to vote on your questions and get the ones that are most popular to the top and ask those. You can do that through the menu. It's probably at the bottom of your Zoom screen. So put your questions in the Q&A for upvoting. You can do that from now, and we'll come to those in the second half. And we'll try to answer as many questions as we can, and I'll really try and keep it moving, but we have to finish sadly at 7 o'clock. So many of you here will already know our guests, but I'm going to ask our guests now to introduce themselves. We've got Edward, Ria, Lily and Dzai. I want to start with Dzai, because Dzai is Lambeth Green Party, so I'm going to show a bit of favouritism. Dzai, why don't you introduce yourself first?
Hi, I'm Dzaier Neil, and I'm from Lambeth Green Party, and I'm the recently elected convener of the Disability Green Party group. Yeah. I didn't get that. How could you try again? How did we? Sorry.
We all got that, Dzai, don't worry.
A little bit about me. So I'm spinally injured, and my story is that I'm an old lady chicken, and I became paralyzed when I was 9 months old, and I was born in Algeria during the Algerian War of Independence, and I was on my mother's back, and I was shot in the back at 9 months old, and I eventually, by the time I was 18 months, it wasn't expected that I would live, and then I came here for medical treatment at the famous Stoke Mandeville Spinal Injury Unit, which is where the guy who ran it was Ludwig Gutmann, who became knighted and also was the founder of the Paralympics. I was orphaned, so I was actually adopted by a patient at Stoke Mandeville Hospital, another paraplegic, and became part of that family. I was very fortunate that I was involved in a very political family. So my politics in life actually started at the age of 4. And I was regularly marching on the Aldermaster marches with my parents, involved in lots of folk music stuff, because it was also part of the Aldermaster, and it kind of went on from there, being involved in the Labour Party and local authority, Now Go Unison, and I was a social worker. I was very rare that I was a permanent wheelchair user, and I worked as a social worker in child protection and other areas in the community. So I was actually one of the forerunners in pushing that I was going to do the job in the same way as everybody else, but I needed the local authority to make changes. So I was actually involved in setting up what was in those days called mobility officers, and so we employed somebody whose job it was to assist me in getting in and out of people's homes if I couldn't do that, in and out of the High Court, because I can assure you it is not wheelchair accessible. And you know, and I've been involved in lots of things around disability, but also other types of politics, and involved in people of colour politics as well, which is I'm involved in the Green Party. And really, I'm just an agitator. That's my role in life, is to agitate and get people to think. And I'm a bit like Marmite, you either love me or you hate me, but that's fine.
I'm going to stop you there because we have to really keep to time. I hope you can bring out more of your story further on, but I will say, yes, Dzaier is absolutely an agitator. But for me, I love Dzaier. Definitely in Lambeth. Thank you very much. Well, you being carried at 4 years old to my on the war march, the Iraq War, around that age as well. And I think there's nothing quite like that. It's fantastic. I recognise my internet connection is slightly unstable. I hope I'm not being lost. Sorry, apologies for that. Let's move on. Ria, introduce yourself. I'm going to keep you to 2 minutes. Sorry.
Yeah, so I am Ria Patel. I am the co-chair of LGBTQIA Greens. I do a lot of work in terms of queer campaigning, both within the Green Party and externally with other organisations like People and Planet, which is a student kind of network of campaigners. I'm also part of Greens of Colour. I'm the external relations officer, and I do lots of work on kind of social media and different things like that. And I'm also a young Green, so I'm 19 and I'm not on the exec like Lily, but I'm on the Democracy and Accountability Committees here, kind of make sure that the executive committee and everyone else are being kind of keeping to the Constitution. And I do lots of work with London Young Greens as well, kind of more locally to me, because I'm based in Croydon, and kind of ensuring that students have the ability to connect. So I've set up a group of university groups that are green related, where we meet once a month so we can share different ideas and things that we're doing. That's very brief, but I'll keep it to that.
That's fantastic, Ria. Thank you. Go to the top of the class. That's brilliant. Let's go to Edward. Let's see if you can beat that time.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. Edward Gildea from the Uttlesford Green Party, and I'm also on the Policy Development Committee as of this year. I guess I was kind of just an average conscientious Green from, I don't know, the mid-80s onwards, but I became an activist after sailing around the world with the Clipper around the world yacht race. I did it in two bursts, and after the first burst coming from Australia sailing home, I just realised that I needed to do something about the planet. And there is something quite amazing. Sailing around the world gives you a visceral connection to the planet. So you go down around 360 degrees around the planet, feeling every wave, every gust of wind, and battling your way through them, or surfing on them, or sleeping, or trying to sleep through them, and so on. And I mean, when you're helming, you are just absorbing every piece of information from the planet, every gust of wind on your face and your throat, every lift of the boat, the behavior of the sails and the heel of the boat, the sound of the surf at the stern. You're taking that all in and instinctively then steering the boat, which is beautiful. But there were two big paradoxes. Firstly, you kind of realize, although most of the time you think, my God, this is a very big ocean, it's taking weeks and weeks to cross it. You end up thinking, my God, this is a small planet. If I can sail around it, this is a tiny planet getting around at a jogging speed. It's small. And then the other paradox is sometimes it is frighteningly violent and very, very powerful. And you just feel, you know, your life is on the edge. And there are other times when it is totally delicate. I mean, you can shift from one climate zone to another climate zone in the space of an hour or so. And just one cloud formation, or particularly off the coast of Newfoundland, switching from a kind of a balmy kind of, you know, the airs of New York, that temperate climate, into iceberg smell and the ice and the difference of that sense of fish and ice on in the night. It was just amazingly delicate. And you're also sailing through the birth of hurricanes, and you're thinking what decision you're going to make about your sails as you go through that. And you realize the energy. We're putting so much heat into the oceans that is turning into these powerful weather systems that are so destructive. And I remember once in the Coral Sea, we had been surrounded by an electrical storm for hours and hours, all around us, lightning flashing. And we hit a big wave, and I was on the foredeck trying to help change a foresail. And, you know, half a ton of water lands on you and you're bracing yourself, and it's hot. It's hot. I would not have bathed a baby in that water. And so you're just thinking, this is frighteningly real. And that coincided with kind of the birth of two grandsons on different points. One grandson born as I'd finished crossing the Atlantic, and another grandson born as we turned around the South Cape of Tasmania and left the Southern Ocean behind us. And you just, you know, so who's inspiring me? It is my grandsons are inspiring me. And since then I've been writing and being active and writing letters and strategies and poetry and goodness knows what as my green activism. So that's me.
It's amazing, everyone. What a remarkable panel we've got. Lily, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Lily. I'm the current co-chair of the Young Greens, and I joined the Green Party when I was 16 after my teacher made me research a party that I knew nothing about, and I'm very glad she did. So I was also, throughout my time at sixth form, I was one of the founding members of Bristol Youth Strike for Climate, and this was really, for me, the first time that I had allowed myself to think about the consequences of the world around us and how it was changing, because until that point, it was just something too overwhelming to handle, to grasp. And until I was able to do something about it, I put it out of my mind. So we organized monthly strikes, and we were very influential in the campaign against the expansion of Bristol Airport. And then at the start of 2020, we had 8 days, and we organized the strike attended by Greta Thunberg, along with 30,000 other people. And that was a really amazing and inspiring event, I like to think, for everyone who attended. It certainly was for me. But since then, and since leaving school, I've really been focusing more on the Green Party. And so I'm the co-chair of the Young Greens, but I'm also a candidate here in Bristol, in Bishopston, Ashley Down, really hoping to be elected in May.
Lily was sharing just before she came on that she was worried she wasn't going to make it. She was out canvassing, which is brilliant. Okay, we're running 5 minutes behind, so I'm going to try and catch up a little bit. We covered a little bit of it in the introductions, but I'm just going to whiz around you all and just get a little bit of a sense from each of you about what inspired your activist journey. Name a few people who inspired you along the way. You don't have to take time at all. I will go with Edward. I'll start with you. Edward, in that famous lockdown phrase, you're on mute.
Thank you. I'm carrying my story on, I guess, from when I arrived in this place, Saffron Walden, a kind of sleepy conservative market town. Well, the area is conservative, the town is a little bit more different. I kind of started a group, an activist group, but it tended to be middle-aged, well, very well-meaning, wonderful middle-aged people, totally upstaged a couple of years later by a group of young mums and dads who were into the primary school network, and they could use social media much better than I could. And so they set up another group, and that kind of they then had wonderful meetings in cafes discussing. They had perhaps a topic and a lead speaker, but a lot of discussion about people's experiences, and people were really actively involved. And then we had a change of power in the district council. The Tories got thrown out, and a local residents' party got in, which is quite remarkable. And I had actually advised them on their green bits of their manifesto, which was fun. And they are deciding they were going to reverse the decision to expand Stansted Airport. So we wanted to really support them in that and put the pressure on them in that. So you know, the young mums, the dads, the babies in prams, the toddlers, the kids from school, the student activists, we were kind of protesting and with banners around the town square and so on, and put a lot of moral pressure on the council, speaking in the public speaking moments, and that was tremendous. And they overturned that decision, which was massive, and that was followed soon after by Bristol overturning its decision on Bristol Airport, and then Southampton Airport, and then Heathrow Airport. And we're thinking, oh my gosh, little sleepy Saffron Walden, we've made some little ripples and they've turned into these massive waves where, you know, carbon dioxide emissions have to start being considered because they didn't have any legal status before. And then they start saying with Heathrow, you've got to consider your obligations under the Paris Agreement. And all of that, actually, you know, the political story has churned on, and there were objections, and the inquest has the public inquiry just has finished today, and so we'll find out what that upshot is. But even if we lose that battle, I think there is a major war is being won with regard to airport expansion and CO2 emissions and so on. So I'm kind of really thrilled by that.
Amazing, Edward, thank you. I'm going to come to you, Ria, in a second. Just a reminder, don't put your questions in the chat, put your questions in the Q&A. And if you're not going to put a question in the Q&A, you can vote. I think you can vote. Can you vote them up? I think you can vote them up and down in the Q&A. Anyway, give it a go, see what happens. Ria, over to you.
Okay, yeah, so I think the question was about kind of my kind of inspiration in the activist journey. And I think more for me, rather than specific people, it's about kind of what I see around me in society and kind of the injustices I see in society. So inequality in terms of race, in terms of sexuality, in terms of gender, in terms of disability, and kind of environmental racism globally around the world, but then also the injustices more locally, like we're seeing right now with the policing bill. And then also, if you look at within the climate movement, traditionally it's quite a white middle class movement, and kind of those injustices there also have kind of inspired me to take action, because I have the privilege to be able to speak out about these things and so many other people can't. And kind of like seeing these things just kind of makes me so angry, and it feels like I need to do something about it. I think that resonates with a lot of activists. But just to name some people, I think my friends, the people around me, but then also there's people in the party. So when I first started getting involved, like Benali and Izzy's, that were always there if I had any questions. And then people in the LGBTIQ+ Greens who have helped create such a good community, like a little sub-community within the Green Party, and then the Green Party as a whole. And then more broadly than that, even like social media, the things you see on there, although sometimes can be quite consuming and all negative, they do kind of motivate me, because I see these things that are happening. I'm thinking, this isn't right, something needs to change, this is unjust, this isn't unequal, and we need to move towards a better world. So those are just some of the things I think that really do keep me going in order to kind of make change.
Yeah, I found that in Lambeth Green Party, that those personal relationships, you've got one or two people who are alongside you, they are so encouraging and motivating. Lily, let's come to you next. Dzaier, I'm saving you till last because I have a feeling you'll have something great. Okay.
Yeah, I think any climate strike organizer or participant even can name Greta Thunberg as an amazing inspiration and influence on what we're doing. But I think the reason that I personally found her so inspirational is just that she is exactly the same as any of us, and all she did is show so many young people that they did have a voice and they could do something and they could use it. People who had never been political before, who had never been to a protest, really found a new way of making themselves heard. And it's not just about that, it's about feeling empowered against a topic and against a world that climate change is often seen as something that, oh, there's nothing anyone can do about it, so think about it. But then outside of that, I think similarly to Ria, the people that have inspired me the most have been people that I've been lucky enough to work with. When you see people your own age who are pushing so hard on an issue, you go, I want to be alongside them, I want to be with them. So my fellow organisers in Bristol have been a really big help to me in that sphere.
I think we've all found Bristol absolutely inspiring, what they've done there, and particularly Carla and Climate Emergency Motions has been fantastic. Dzaier.
Right, well, for me, it's actually about social justice. And that may be because, you know, I'm a woman of colour with a disability, and, you know, I believe within the party and also outside of the party, social justice is incredibly important. And actually COVID has highlighted that, you know, with horrific figures of deaths, you know, 20,000 young people with learning disabilities dying of COVID. The fact that disabled people initially were not even put in priority for COVID vaccines. I mean, that's just kind of like the tip of the iceberg. So for me, in terms of grassroots, there's a famous woman called Judith Hermann, who was actually the founder and leader of the activist movement of disability in America, which actually triggered, I mean, it actually, you know, the constitution that they have now was actually based from the fights that they had. And one of the things that was great for me in terms of my family and my background was that it was always said in our family, if you believed in something strong enough, you would fight for it. And if that meant you went to prison, or if that meant, you know, that your life was on the line for it, you fought for it. And for me, that's hugely important. And there are so many people in our society that don't have a voice, are not strong enough to have a voice, and actually are not, you know, don't feel strong enough to be able to fight for it. And someone's got to do it. So recently, I suppose, I mean, I actually, in the past, I set up a social enterprise where I provided exercise classes and massage for people who are living in supported housing, sheltered accommodations. And we had a kind of, there were 6 of them in Lambeth, 6 of them involved, and there was a mixing, people come, you know, and I suppose my fight, how I feel at the moment, is that that fight on disability needs to happen in the Green Party, and I've started doing that, being vocal about how disability, you know, when you think that 1 in 5 of the population have a disability or a long-term health condition. We're old, we're young, you know, we're middle-aged, we're male, we're female, we're, you know, we're trans, we're everybody, and actually we're a very large minority. And so for me, that's the thing that's really, really important, is to expand so that we all mix together. And also the other thing that I think has just been fantastic for me, I'm also on the Greens of Colour Committee, and I'm the disability officer. And it's been such an amazing experience being part of that group. The people are wonderful, supportive, open-minded, and actually willing to look at other things outside of people of colour, which is amazing. So that's it for me. Is social justice in the party, to me, is the most important thing. I know it's maybe controversial in the party, but that is what is important to me, and that's why I joined the party.
Yeah, I don't think it should be controversial, Dzai. You are absolutely spot on for me. We're falling a little bit behind, so I'm going to let's get into the meat of this stuff. Ria, I'm going to come to you. So one of the things we often bring up in our live conversations is there are often tensions within solution building. We're all trying to find solutions. We need urgent action, but there's also a need for kind of mindset change. How do you think we can reconcile these two things? Are there any missteps, any mistakes from the activist movements so far that we think we can learn from, that can be instructive for the future? It's a chance to, let's have a bit of critique, let's be honest, let's be open, let's allow ourselves to be challenged. Really challenge it.
Yeah, so I think this is a really important question. It's really interesting as well to look at, in kind of having that kind of diversity of thought is so fundamental to having kind of change, because you need people to challenge you, you need differences of opinion in order to reach the best solution, and you won't get that without that. And I think so far within kind of the activist movements, there hasn't been that much diversity. I feel like both within kind of environmental movements, but also within social justice movements, they need to kind of encompass all different kinds of intersectional people. And they need to allow those voices to be heard and uplift those voices so that all different voices can be heard and all different opinions can be heard, so that we have a better understanding of people's needs and desires, basically, to make the world a better place. And I think in terms of kind of having that tension between needing a solution immediately, but then also needing to change people's minds, I think having more diverse representation within these movements would help that too, because you'd have people who would agree with both sides of that debate, and kind of you'd come to a middle ground in that you need immediate action right now, and that could be implemented through policy, and then from that you can get kind of change and more acceptance. And actually there's a theory in psychology, I can't remember the name off the top of my head, that says like that's kind of how you do create kind of social change from a minority perspective and make it a majority point of view.
Edward, do you see us repeating mistakes of the past in other activist movements and not learning from those mistakes? I think we are learning.
There have been some mistakes. I mean, one of the ones that comes to my mind is, you know, the Extinction Rebellion, when they glued themselves to the Docklands Light Railway, and you're thinking, no, that's a really sustainable piece of transport. That shouldn't be the line of attack. But actually, a lot of the movement, activist movement, Extinction Rebellion or Reclaim the Power or whatever, has been creative and brilliant, theatrical, you know, visual, and has grabbed the attention, got the headlines without being sort of overstepping the line. And then I think a lot of the movements that I've been involved in, the protests I've been involved in, the peacefulness has been really impressive and really hot on disrupt, but disrupt peacefully. I remember once being on a sort of standing outside the Bank of England. It was on my birthday, I think, and there was a rabbi praying in the street. And eventually the police decided they were going to drag this rabbi off. You know, half a dozen of them picked up this old man while he was praying. Obviously, he was making a wonderful traffic jam while he was praying. And as the police dragged him off, I kind of shouted out, "Shame on you." And then this steward, kind of a peace steward from Extinction Rebellion, came up to me and said, "No, that's not how we do it. You know, we don't do it that way." And I was given a very firm but gentle kind of ticking off for saying that. And it, you know, this notion of what relationship we should have with the police was a good one. I remember sort of camping outside the fracking site in Lancashire and chatting to the police there, and they saying, "Look, we're trying to defend your right to protest peacefully. But we're also having to defend the right of this fracking company to do what it's doing because it's legal at the moment. So, you know, we might disagree with it, but it is legal." And that was good. That was very healthy. But I think there's always this problem, isn't it, with law and order. Yes, we want to have law and order, but when the laws are bad, when they're oppressive, when they are leading us in a disastrous direction, what do you do about it? So that is always, that's going to be an ongoing dilemma. But that's why I think I mentioned that my older sister, my goody two shoes older sister got arrested a couple of years ago in Whitehall, and we were just so proud of her as a family. It was absolutely brilliant that my big sister, who's just turned 70 at the weekend, got arrested. And I think there is that sort of such courage to do that. It's wonderful.
Reminds me, in the Occupy protests in 2008, 2009, we worked out that, remember there's that encampment in the city outside St. Paul's Cathedral, and St. Paul's kind of washed their hands of it. They said, we only have responsibility for the steps, not anything beyond the steps. So I knelt down during the evictions, when the police were moving in, on the steps of St. Paul's and started praying to see what would happen. And I was physically carried away by 4 policemen and dragged away. So it reminded me of that. That's great. Yeah. Lily, Okay, so there are always tensions between activist groups, and often we share values, we have different emphases. Sometimes the activist groups kind of come together, sometimes they seem to be competing against each other. It happens at the NGO level probably even more. What do you think we can do to build solidarity between groups?
Well, I think other than more nuanced reporting, which we can't control at all about which groups are which, I think that people within individual groups sometimes get so caught up in the idea that their method and the way that they're going about creating change is the right way and the only way. I think people across all sides need to think about that difference of approach is sometimes necessary. And for some people, being arrested, for example, is an amazing thing that they can do, that they have the space in their life and a way that they can fight for a cause. But for other people, they're not in a position where they can do that. And I think different groups just need to be respectful of each other with that. I personally am someone who would be willing to be arrested, but I have had people in groups like Extinction Rebellion be really upset about the fact that the youth strikes don't promote that line as a method of protest. But the reason we do that is because some of our participants are primary school age, we're children. We're not really going to be going out there and telling people this is what you have to do. So we need to know that there are different ways of going about the same goal and respecting that on all levels.
Dzaier, particularly around intersectionality, have you got, how can we work together more? You came from Labour. The idea of the Labour Party is that it represents a kind of Labour movement, that we work together. Those are your roots. You came to the Green Party. Have you found challenges in the Green Party about, I know you've got a good critique of the Green Party and I want to hear it, this is your chance to come out with it. But have you found that the Green Party provides a forum for kind of being a political representation of the various diverse groups? Do you get a sense of a movement like you had in Labour with the Labour movement? Is there more that we should be doing to facilitate the working together? Where are the challenges for you?
Yeah, there's some wonderful things about the Green Party, but from my point of view is that I think we've forgotten about the working classes. We've forgotten about the poor in our society. We've forgotten about the disadvantaged. But one of the great things I think in the party is that there is a big move at the moment for all the liberation groups within the party to actually interconnect and give the same message, actually, because we're all actually saying the same things. We may be saying them in different ways, but we're all saying the same things. We're all saying, and I think to some degree, COVID has maybe done that. So, because we're all suffering, it doesn't matter whether we're from, whatever liberation group or whatever group in society, we're all suffering, and we're all actually experiencing, actually what the disadvantaged in our society have been experiencing for years, decades. So for me, yeah, if you look at in terms of the movement, the people, I call it the people's movement. If you look at our history in this country, it has come from the working classes. It's come from the people who've suffered, and I think that's what I feel. That's what we need to be doing. I think we need to be pushing much more on terms of social justice, in terms of housing, in terms of disability, in terms of women's issues, LGBT issues, unemployment, poverty, housing is a huge issue for many, many groups within the party and outside of the party. And I'd love to see us being proud and going out there and saying to the people that we believe don't vote, have a voice, come and join us. This is what we can do, because if we can get those people to join us and to vote, we will win, because it's those people and the people on the estates and people, the black population in our country that is keeping Labour in power. And if we can get those people supporting us, but we have to be speaking their language. We have to be speaking what is important to them. And I'm not saying that environmental issues are not important, but they may not be as important at that time, because people are worrying about keeping a roof over their head. They're worrying about putting food in their mouths. They're worrying about their children being educated properly. There's all of that, and that's kind of, sorry, that's kind of my view on it. Is that and I think we can do it, and I think the liberation groups are so important in the party.
Totally agreed. So, yeah, just to say, I mean, our biggest swing in Labour's safest seat in Lambeth came when we were alongside residents defending their estate against demolition. You know, going from 4th place to missing out on taking the council seat with 40 votes in 6 weeks, because we addressed the concerns of local people and supported them in that. For Lily and Ria now, about you. I don't. Okay.
Sorry, Jonathan, you've just cut out a little bit.
Thank you for letting me know. I didn't know that. I will try and speak more slowly and try and get my internet connection better. Not everyone's going to be an activist. How do young people find their place within the movement? I always feel it's very patronizing to say young people are the leaders of tomorrow. I believe that actually young people are showing the leadership right here, right now through the school strikes, which older generations have failed to do. But there isn't necessarily the history, there isn't necessarily the kind of experience. They're forging a new path, doing things in new ways, which is absolutely great, and learning from the mistakes of the past. How do young people find their place within the movement most effectively? Maybe come to Lily and then Ria.
Yeah, I think so much of it is about access. I think something that we saw with the youth strike movement is that we would just put up a time and a place and say, come meet, come join, and anyone could come, and we were very careful to keep it you know, after school, near where we would actually strike, where we knew people could get to, and we were open to everyone. But when you look at more NGO and more established protest systems and groups, you find that it's a lot harder to join. I know that I looked at interning at Greenpeace, for example, and it was a nightmare to find their opportunities for young people and how to apply and where it's advertised and what time. And I think that we need more systems of young people getting into these spaces. I think that a lot of this can also start at even a secondary school level or sixth form level, when people are trying to do work experience. It's mandatory in a lot of state schools. And this is also something that is an issue for people from all sorts of different backgrounds. Ria?
Yeah, I agree with everything you're saying. And I think also we need to recognize that it's fine. No one has to do anything. It's fine if you don't have the capacity to do it. It's fine if you don't have the ability where you are right now to do anything. If you're just focusing on keeping a roof over your head, that's completely fine and valid. You don't have to be worrying about anything extra and creating more stress for yourself. But if you are passionate about things, find that passion and speak up about it. Find platforms that will allow for your voice to be heard, and create open spaces for communities to communicate openly about different issues that they are passionate about, and create safe ways to do that as well. I mean, we were speaking of arrest earlier, and oftentimes it is like a badge of honor within the climate movement, and that's fantastic and great for some people. But if we speak about Black people, if we speak about people of colour, they're more likely to experience police brutality. It's same with trans people. They're more likely to experience police brutality whilst being kind of arrested. And that's fine if we can't all protest, or if we are scared of being arrested, and that's valid too. But I think most importantly, I would reiterate what I was saying earlier about kind of just finding what you are passionate about and speaking about it. You don't have to speak to it in front of hundreds and hundreds of people. You can speak to it to your friends, your family, create awareness of the issues that you're passionate about. Because in the end, kind of change does happen quite slowly. And I guess it does happen through community building and kind of speaking to different members of your local communities, and kind of people and networks, and none of us will be liberated until we all are liberated. And so keeping that in mind as well.
Ria, thanks very much. I mean, I'll let you into a secret. I actually hate talking to a group of like 30 or 40 people. I get very, very nervous even now. I'm fine in front of a camera, but put me in front of people, I hate it. And it's about finding your place, isn't it? And what you feel comfortable with. Okay, I want to move into questions because time is really, really marching on. This has absolutely flown by. We have had a question very, very quickly about the policing bill. And I just want to lay out our stance. Our stance is unequivocally is that we oppose the policing bill that's coming for its second reading before Parliament at the moment. We think it's an unprecedented attack on civil liberties. The Green Party now and always will support the right to protest. We are absolutely clear that people should be able to express their concerns in a peaceful manner, and over a dangerous piece of legislation that the government wants to push through. Caroline Lucas has signed an amendment to get rid of this bill, to throw it out. We support those who are taking part in the demonstrations outside Parliament Square tonight, and we encourage them to observe social distancing and keep one another safe, of course. But we urge the police to show restraint and allow people to exercise their right to protest, and it is their right to protest. And the last thing we want to see this evening is a repeat of the appalling scenes at Clapham Common with the vigil on Saturday. So sorry, I just needed to say that because of what's happening right now. We have some questions around the policing bill that we're not going to be able to come to all four, I think, for each question. So I might pick you out, and I'm sorry to put you on the spot. If you want to pass, and I can pass the question on to someone else, that's absolutely fine. Or I might just say, who wants to answer this? Top question is, how and when is the Green Party going to organise climate protests and direct action against the erosion of UK democracy via the horrible new policing bill and no-bid NHS contracts to Tory donors? And I've said what I want to say on that. I want to open the floor. Does anyone want to address that specifically? Stick your hand up amongst the panel if you do. Don't let me down. Edward.
It's an interesting one for the Green Party. I mean, I tend to kind of use the Green Party to do my political work. And if I want to be an activist, I will do it under another heading, so with Extinction Rebellion or another group, or with Greenpeace, and so on. And I think that helps. I think the Green Party has decided we want to be a political party, and we're going to attack these things through a political route, locally or nationally, or whatever level of democracy you're working. And I think that, for me, that would be the way with these things that desperately need to be opposed. The policing bill or the contracts by Tory donors have to be attacked. But I think you join the Green Party to attack it through political means. And personally, then, if I want to get out on the streets, I'll be putting a different hat on.
Dzaier, you want to say something in addition?
Yeah, I just want to quickly say, protest is the most important thing that we have, and as a party, we have to protest, and look at history. And the place to look at history is sort of the more modern, and I do say more modern, history was poll tax, and also Iran, our country being involved in Iran. Millions of people in this country protested, and it didn't matter what party they came from. It didn't matter. It was the issue, and actually, in terms of poll tax, the protests actually got things changed. So protest is hugely important in actually, because you have to have the numbers. you know, you know, the police can be friendly or they can be unfriendly. And maybe we have to learn how to use the police to our benefit. But yeah, protest to me is the way, one of the ways forward. Being out there, especially in terms of COVID, we have to recognise that this government is using COVID as a kind of smokescreen. It's using, when I say as a smokescreen, it's using COVID and the bills, the stuff that they brought in through the COVID Act to close us down as members of the British society. And we have to protest against that. Safely, but we have to protest against that.
Thanks, I mean, this is a fascinating question. If peaceful protest is outlawed in the UK, we're not there yet, but we've heard it's under threat. Do you see the only options for voicing one's dissent at government policy at the ballot box, or will violent protest become the criminalised in brackets norm? I know in that question we haven't got non-violent protest in there, which can be subversive as well. Who would like to tackle that one? Lily.
Well, I think that protest at the ballot box will always be hard under a system that isn't fully proportional. And so personally, I would be put in that situation, I would be pushed to criminal, but possibly non-violent protest. It's about how willing are you to break a law if you think that it's wrong.
I will just say that we've been asked questions about this over the last few days, and we are absolutely, one of our pillars of the Green Party is non-violent protest, and I think it's really, really important. Those that haven't read it, they want to read up on non-violent protest. Gene Sharp has produced a number of books on 300 methods of non-violent direct action. Some of them break the law, some of them don't. He's got 3 volumes. I've got them on my bookshelf right here next to me in my office, and they're well worth reading. I think they've never been so pertinent. Dzaier.
I just again want to go back to history. The suffragettes, it was a peaceful protest. The fact that they were being attacked by the police or whatever, but it was a peaceful protest. So our protests should always be peaceful. It's not about us going out, armed with, I don't know, pebbles or whatever. It's about us standing firm in a peaceful manner. But we have to be realistic that things can turn, in terms of the police can turn on us. Now, I'm a bit of a coward, and I love going on marches and protests, and I get great pleasure out meeting wonderful people. But there's a point where I realise I can have a feel of what's going on, and I realise this is time for me to leave. But we have to protest, and history has shown it time and time again, the suffragettes being one of them. That's why I, as a woman, am able to vote in this country.
Thanks, I. Okay, we've got a question about education here. It's been promoted up. How do you start lobbying, adding to the curriculum of secondary school the subjects of environment, social justice, that Dzai's talked about very eloquently, political science? If you start, young people will be more aware and more likely to do things about issues, is what the questioner says, and that question is from Marcel. Ria or Lily, I'm looking to you to answer, but I see everyone's got a hand as well. But I'll let Ria and Lily go first if they want. Lily.
Yeah, I'll be quick so other people can speak. I would massively signpost everyone who can to the Teach the Future campaign that was sort of grown as an offshoot of youth climate strikers who were particularly concerned about this issue and are doing amazing stuff. I think they're about to set up Teach the Future Ireland. They've got Wales and Scotland and England all going now, and they've had parliamentary receptions as well as all sorts of work pushing on this issue.
Fantastic. Ria.
Yeah, I was just literally going to echo exactly what Lily said about that campaign. It's absolutely fantastic. Recommend you check it out. And also write to kind of your local primary school, your school, if you've just left, lobby them, get your friends to do it as well, to show that there is kind of a need and desire from past students for this kind of more kind of environmentally focused kind of curriculum.
Edward.
Yeah, well, one thing you can do is join the new education policy working group, which has just been set up. So join one of the policy working groups, whatever takes your fancy, and get them developing policy. But the other thing, my thoughts on the curriculum is, I mean, we've got a national curriculum that is horribly overcrowded and misses the point. There is only one subject on the curriculum that I believe in, and that is the relationship between the teacher and the student. And if that relationship is one that inspires and motivates and makes them resilient and makes them curious and makes them want to find out more, that will give you all the flexibility and versatility and wisdom for life. And if you've got the right teacher, and then you actually depopulate the curriculum to some extent, so these bottom-up movements can get there, and kids who want to know about climate have the space to find out about climate and biodiversity, and they've got an inspiring teacher that takes them on a field trip. You know, I think our problem is we've got an overloaded maths and English. I mean, I love English. I mean, I was an English teacher, but it is just such a narrowed curriculum, and I would like to free it up totally and just have an inspirational curriculum where the relationship comes first.
Lots of nodding there from Ria and Lily. I wish that out of this COVID pandemic, we had a complete rethink of what education is about. Really, we seem to have missed something here. Okay. Oh, question has disappeared. Hang on. Sorry, it's gone down. Here we are. Okay, this is an old chestnut. Let's move through it quickly if we can. From Janet Arthur: does the party need to expand its name, change its name, so it convinces everyone that it has an opinion on all political topics? I'm going to take one person who wants to address that one. Ria.
I think that understandably, green is quite misleading. It is to do with kind of environmental justice. You do think green environment, but it's important to recognize what green politics is actually. It isn't just solely about the environment, it's also about social justice. It's about sustainable living. It encompasses so many different elements of environmentalism, non-violence, social justice, kind of grassroots campaigning and community organizing. So kind of straying away from the green kind of name would lose all of its meaning to do with green politics. And so green politics is about all of these different things, and I wouldn't really want to change the name. It's more about educating people about what green politics is.
Thank you, Ria. I'm sure we'll come back to that one. Mike Dixon says, how best to protest against an economic system that promotes endless GDP growth and consumerism? What's the best way of protesting? Edward.
Yeah, I could go on this one. Well, I mean, firstly, we've got some very good policy working groups working on the economics in climate change. So get involved in another policy working group. And what is exciting for me, I think economics are on the edge of a massive change. I mean, the theories about the degrowth or the circular economy or the donut economy, we clearly need an economy that works for one planet. We need one planet economics. And it's becoming blindingly obvious that our economics don't work unless we've got several planets. And that's what we don't have. It's also been incredibly clear through COVID that social justice isn't working through our economic system. The trickle-down effect doesn't happen. The wealthy are getting wealthier, the poor are getting poorer, and we just know that that form of capitalism is broken. And so it seems to me that inevitable a new one is going to evolve. And I think this is an immense opportunity for the Green Party to show that a new Green Deal will create jobs, will create greatest prosperity, will actually be good for social justice. And that's one of the things I'm really most excited about. These things are going to change.
Okay, I'm going to lob a hand grenade in here, Edward, because the way you said that, it sounded like you wanted a new form of capitalism or a new system. I would not be an advocate of a new form of capitalism.
Well, it's got to be capitalism, but it's just changing the way you measure growth, for example, GDP, and having new ways of measuring it.
Okay, is there anyone else that wants to come in and counter that? If not, I will.
I think you've just got to disrupt the whole system. I agree with points that you were saying, definitely, I understand, but capitalism kind of forces the marginalised to become further marginalised, I think, in my opinion. It is inherently ableist. It doesn't favour any marginalised communities. It kind of pushes people to be as productive as possible without kind of reaping any of the benefits, and kind of the current system we live in, which kind of prioritizes this free market that's not actually free, isn't the way to go. So I just kind of want to stay away from reinventing capitalism and kind of having a completely circular kind of economy.
So we're not going to solve that one tonight. I just wanted to lob it out there to get people talking. This is going to have to be the last question, but I think it's a really, really good one to end on. It's from Stephen Thompson. How do we ensure that we develop a two-handed strategy of reasoned democratic participation, i.e. the electoral politics, with a, brackets, reluctant resolve to disruptive protest, and again, in brackets, this is the questioner, civil disobedience? So how do we ensure that we develop this two-handed strategy? What's the best way of holding these in tension? The electoral politics, we are a political party, we're not a pressure group. That's what we do, electoral politics, but we recognize that we need to be involved also in disruptive, non-violent, direct action. I'm going to whip round everyone quickly. You've each got 30 seconds to respond to this. How do we hold these two things in tension? How do we develop this strategy? Dzaier, I'll start with you.
I think it's easy because they go hand in glove. Every other political party is doing that every other, so being protesting and in terms of voting, it's all part and parcel of the same thing, and it's all about your policies and how you sell them, that actually, because at the end of the day, it's the masses that make change. It's the people like Ria, myself, the people on this panel, members of the party and outside, on the estates, etc. So I think they go hand in glove, actually.
Great, thank you. Lily.
Yeah, I think the Green Party has always made it clear when they support a pressure group or a protest movement, and have to be quite vocal about that. And I think really it's just continuing that when, and hopefully soon, we are in power. I think it's easier to support that kind of pushback when you are the opposition. And I hope that one day it's continuing to support that when it's criticizing yourself.
Edward.
Yeah, you do it inside your own head and decide, in order to do it this way, I will work through the Green Party and work through democratic systems at all levels and push as hard as I can through the ballot box. And then on another day, another weekend, you'll say, right, well, I'm going to be out on the streets and I'll be doing an Extinction Rebellion thing. You know that there'll be a whole load of other Green Party activists there, but on that day, you are doing what you're doing through another organization. And you just, choose your horses for your courses.
And Ria.
Yeah, echoing everything that everyone's already said. I think that kind of democratic participation, and kind of voting, that and our policies, that allows for the kind of implementation of what we want to see and the change we want to see. But how do we get the changes kind of through this kind of more non-violent protesting methods and campaigning and all of these other kind of methods of getting our voices heard and our opinions heard in the first place and getting awareness to them, and then through the policies, and when we are in power or in opposition, we get to challenge and allow for that change to happen.
Fantastic. I am so gutted that we've only got an hour and we have to finish here. We've got to wind down. Thank you so much to all four of you for taking the time to share your ideas, share your stories with us today. What an amazing wealth of different backgrounds and stories. For those who are watching, we'll pop a link for the next event hosted by the Green Party. It will take place next week with stories from Celtic Greens. Julie's going to drop their link in the chat now, and you'll be able to RSVP through that link. And of course, if you're interested in being a member of the Green Party, we'd love to have you as a member. Julie's going to pop a link as well about where you can sign up for that. And if you're not quite ready to join the party, maybe you're a member of another party even, but you want to have a deeper look or associate yourself with our work, we welcome you to sign up as a Green friend. And we'll share a link to the friends sign up in the chat as well. It's a great way of kind of just dipping your toe in the water. Maybe not ready to be a member, but you want to associate yourself or interested in finding out more, you can become a Green friend. And that link's going to go in the chat as well. Very finally, after this ends, you'll be welcomed onto our donation page if you're in a position to help fund our plans, particularly pushing forward on the green recovery. Please do give. Wishing you all a great evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you.